So around this time 1 year ago, we got the news that WWE will not be renewing the contract of Dean Ambrose. 1 year later, he is one of the top superstars in professional wrestling as Jon Moxley. We talk about how his career has made a complete 180 and the impact that it's made in professional wrestling next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. For news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. So Ralph, late last week was the anniversary of the news that broke that Dean Ambrose will not be renewing his WWE contract. Here we are a year later. He went from WWE reject to AEW Superstar.
Yep.
How does that happen with somebody?
Creative freedom. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's really one of the biggest things that drove Dean Ambrose or Moxley away from the WWE. And we know that from his interview with Jericho. That was like the podcast that broke the internet, right?
Yep.
Everybody was going out to listen to this. So he really went in on WWE, said a lot of things, talked about the creative process and how that was one of the things that drove him away from WWE. Now, like you said, fast forward 1 year later, what does this mean for the wrestling industry? So I think that one of the most important things this means for the wrestling industry as a whole is it showed that there is life outside of the WWE. And you see that more and more often. You see that guys are turning down big contracts from WWE to go elsewhere because there is creative freedom and there are other places to go and work.
Not only that, you're seeing guys either ask for their release or saying they're not going to renew their contract because they know the grass is greener on the other side. Where, we talk about the Revival all the time. Luke Harper, a.k.a. Brody Lee, who just got released. Let's even go back a few years before Moxley, Ambrose left WWE. Cody Rhodes took that same gamble, and look how, he's one of the top baby faces in professional wrestling because of what he did. So, there was a time where WWE could just throw money at somebody and say, all right, I'll take the money because I can't get this money elsewhere.
Yep.
And you even look at a guy like Joey Ryan, who spent his career in independent wrestling, had an offer from WWE to go to NXT, and he turned it down and ended up in Impact. So that's really the thing here. Like, guys can go wherever they want and not feel like, oh, well, he didn't go to WWE because they didn't want him, or he's not going to succeed in WWE. You know what? The money's not, the money could be made somewhere else, and the creative freedom's just somewhere else.
Yeah, and he's part of the reason why all of this is happening for everybody. So guys like the Revival can say that, you know what, we don't want to re-sign with WWE. He's part of the reason why AEW is so successful, and he's part of the reason why they're so credible right now, because him going there, being one of the bigger stars in WWE adds instant credibility, right? So you look at kind of what's going on right now in AEW, and you see that him and Jericho, two guys that walked away from WWE, are at the top there, right? You got Jericho, who's the champion, who's done wonders for them.
Yep.
And you got a guy like Moxley who's trying to challenge him for the title and take the title away from him. Now, when all this is said and done, assuming that AEW doesn't go out of business, and I don't think they will, they stick around, people are going to look back on the history of professional wrestling, and one of the most iconic moments that they're going to recall is his debut at Double or Nothing.
Yep.
Now, that is more than just a debut, because that was really a huge pay-per-view in the sense that, nobody was really doing those type of numbers and selling out places unless you were WWE.
Right.
So for AEW to be successful and for that event to be successful, him debuting was huge.
That was the equivalent of when Luger debuted at Nitro. That was the Luger moment where Luger just showed up at the Mall of America night one of Monday Nitro, and then the floodgates open. Like, oh my God, Luger's there, Hogan's there, Savage is there, Flair is there. All these guys that had tenures in WWE are now in WCW. You're seeing that now in WWE in AEW. And of course, everyone has maybe back then, oh, they're leaving WWE, they could go to WCW. Now the talk is they're leaving WWE to go to AEW. But that's not always the case. You can leave WWE and go to New Japan Pro Wrestling, which Moxley has done as well. And let's talk about that. You talk about his in-ring career in WWE. Can you really name a match that was like, oh my God, this is a memorable 5-star match.
He's had some good matches, but I think that his run now is certainly more littered with more impressive matches.
Yes.
And, I think that this right now is starting to define his legacy and how people are going to remember him.
Right. Now you look at in AEW, he had, the match with Omega, which a lot of people talked about for good or bad reasons, but still I think was a pretty decent match. This match coming up with Jericho, I think is going to be ended up being a good match. But in New Japan, the matches that he's had with Juice Robinson, the matches that he had with Naito and Ishii during the G1.
Yep.
You got the dream match coming with Minoru Suzuki. This is being recorded before that match, but
got a little taste of it this past week.
Yep, and it was good.
Yep.
The little taste that we did get was good. I'm excited for it this coming weekend. And his matches with Pac and AEW have been good as well.
Even his match with Darby Allin.
Yeah,
that's not a match that people are going to remember for the rest of time, but he's allowed to go out there and have the type of matches that he wants. He's allowed to dictate the type of match he wants, and he's allowed to dictate who he wants to be as a character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you're not necessarily allowed to do when you're in the WWE,
right,
because there isn't as much creative freedom, as far as people say.
Well, I think, for a while now, that has always been the case where Vince has had the final say and all these promos are scripted word for word. But I think, for the last few months, I feel like either the wrestlers are getting better at memorizing the lines or they're having a little bit more creative freedom and things to say. Like, I feel like Roman's promos have felt more natural. I felt like Drew McIntyre has been pretty good on the mic and Elias has been better. It's not so much, I got to remember all this. Even Seth Rollins has done better. Now, I'm not saying WWE as a whole has been better because there are still some things that people hate, Rusev, Lashley, but, even that, they're taking something that is absolute garbage and making it awesome. And I think that can also be a testament to what Moxley's done in AEW. Like, listen, here's what can happen if you just let us do some things that we want.
Yep.
Sometimes it's going to fall flat in their face, like Lana saying she's the best WW superstar. But then you have some moments where, you see Roman Reigns and he's like, you know what? This guy can actually have a decent promo if you just let him do his thing.
Yeah, and AEW is important for the wrestling industry, especially right now, because it's good for the fans because it's an alternative. It's also good for the wrestlers because it's an alternative place for other wrestlers to go. So if you want to leave WWE, and assuming AEW wants to sign you, that's good for them. It's also good for a financial standpoint if you're a wrestler too, because WWE is going to have to pay a little bit more now to retain certain talent. But creatively, and we talked about this probably about a year ago, Moxley and Jericho especially going to AEW is important because it gives them instant credibility. It makes it easier for TV stations like TNT to give them contracts and renew their contracts and give them an extra night or whatever the case may be, because now you could say, look, it's not just guys like Kenny Omega, Young Bucks, and as good as they are, I would say that there weren't necessarily numbers that you could point to and say that these guys are going to be successful.
Yeah.
It's a big risk. Adding guys like Jericho, adding guys like Moxley is important because it adds credibility. And now, if you're a TV station, you could say, hey, I know those guys. They were in WWE. They were really big draws. I mean, Ambrose, while he was in WWE, was a part of the Shield. And Jericho obviously has been a star for years. So adds credibility. As far as a WWE standpoint and creative, those guys leaving for creative freedom now means it puts pressure on WWE to say, look, maybe we do have to give these guys a little more creative freedom. Certainly the content has to be better because now we actually have competition, or, people don't like that word competition, but whatever. Alternative. It means that WWE has to produce a better product.
Right.
And Moxley leaving and going to AEW is a big reason of why that is happening.
I think also the other big thing that WWE has to change because of guys like Moxley is you have to strike when the iron's hot. And I think for a while, Vince had these plans. We're going to put Roman in the big spot. We're going to have Brock Lesnar versus Roman. We're going to have, he always had a path. But now Moxley leaves, becomes a giant superstar. This is a guy that you could have some things to do with him, and you just let him leave because he was just creatively frustrated, exhausted, mentally depressed, whatever the case may be. But now, going into this Royal Rumble, it was, Roman's going to win, challenge the Fiend, and main event WrestleMania and dethrone the Fiend. That wasn't the case. Drew McIntyre, while some people were kind of guessing it, they, upset a lot of people, or I shouldn't say upset, but shocked a lot of people when he ended up winning. He was the one that eliminated Brock Lesnar. It wasn't Cain Velasquez. It wasn't Tyson Fury. It wasn't Roman Reigns. It was Drew McIntyre,
right.
A guy that a lot of people were behind for the last couple of years since he came back to WWE.
And look what happened. The fans went nuts. People talked about it being as one of the best Royal Rumbles of all time. In my opinion, probably top 5. Certainly, in my opinion, top 5 all time. And that's something that WWE hasn't. When's the last time you walked away from a Royal Rumble and you were like, you know what? That was good. It was a really good show. I'm happy that it ended this way. Like, it wasn't predictable. Had you got Roman Reigns winning, it would have been the predictable outcome.
Yep.
But now that you have competition and now that there's other promotions that are being successful, it puts pressure on WWE to try different things. You can't just do the status quo. You can't just do we're going to be stubborn, so we're going to give you Batista, and he's going to face Triple H, and they're going to main event WrestleMania, because people don't want to see that anymore.
Right.
People want a better product, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you have guys like Moxley and Jericho who can make other companies successful and bring them up as far as a credibility standpoint, that's good for the entire industry. And when people look back on the history of professional wrestling, him leaving WWE, depending on what happens with AEW, how successful they are, that can be one of the things that people point to, and they're like, yeah, that's a really big moment in professional wrestling history. And if he ever chooses to go back to WWE, it makes it that much bigger of a return, because I'm sure the place would go nuts for him.
They would go nuts for him, I think. And I think, if he goes back to WWE, he could just be like, listen, I tried for years to change things around here. Look what I did in AEW. Let me just do the same thing here in WWE. And because of how big WWE is, I think whoever's running it, whether it is Vince McMahon or Triple H or someone else, they'll be like, okay, here's your microphone, go at it.
Yep.
Just know there's a couple things you can't do that TNT will allow, USA won't. That's the difference.
And I haven't even seen him really do much on Dynamite or say things that he wouldn't necessarily be allowed to not say on WWE.
I think it's more, he's out there just being himself. He's not wearing gas masks. He's not telling the crowd, that they smell, taking shots, preventing, doing things with Mitch the Plant, dressing up like the Mountie, doing stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
He did the best he could with that stuff, but just let him be.
Yep.
And that's the moral of this story. Just let the wrestlers be. Creative freedom could do so much. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean creative freedom is going to make you a great guy. You got to be able to do what you can with that creative freedom, and Moxley's hit it out of the park. So,
Great.
And his matches have been awesome. His promos have been awesome. His character's been awesome. Whether he's in New Japan or AEW, he's must watch wrestling right now.
Let's not forget the buzz he had with Killer Cross as well.
That's true.
That was something that went around.
And of course, if that happens, Killer Cross, will he end up in AEW? Will he go to NXT? That's still up to debate at the time of this recording. But if that happens in AEW or even New Japan, that's a must-watch match, I think.
Absolutely.
So let us know what you guys think of the transformation of Dean Ambrose and Jon Moxley in the last year in the comments below. Don't forget to share this all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, SCPV Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Rob Valenti, my name's Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.